Hi guys, welcome to another video. Sorry it's been a while, just had quite a lot on, been quite busy. Thanks for all of the positive feedback and to all those who have liked and subscribed. It really is appreciated, so thank you. Now, you may have noticed, if you follow the ESSEX Boys case, that Liquid Bullet Productions, if you don't know who they are a YouTube channel who had previously interviewed previously interviewed Steve Nipper-Ellis, which was when the claims came out that Steve's dad had murdered them, which I don't personally believe, but that's for another video. Anyway, yeah, if you follow Liquid Bullet Productions, you may have noticed that they've made another video, and this is interviewing an ex-detective who now works for a private investigation company called TMI, who are currently re-examining the case. Now, personally, I think that it's great that individuals are still, after all these years, trying to investigate what actually happened that night. They are reaching out to anybody who could give information to prove that Tony Patton Craig was still alive after 6:45 that evening. Now, if they were alive after that time, it's a possibility that somebody out there has some information. Now, one theory I have, a personal idea, which links into Billy Jasmer's statement, could be a possibility, but unless new witnesses come forward, it's going to be impossible to get any real justice, which I think is fucking disgusting. Anybody who knows the case knows that the trial was a shambles, to say the fucking least. Now, as I said, I have a few ideas to what could have happened that night, and one of my theories is this, and it's rather a simple one, a simple idea, but I believe it a plausible one. Tony Patton Craig, after all meeting up that evening, ended up getting on it. In simpler terms, they had a drug-taking binge. Now, we know that the guys had a history of doing this, and the fact that they had dinner dates arranged that evening and made no effort to counsel or let any of their girlfriends know, under normal evening of normal circumstances with normal people, the fact they didn't show or notify their partners might have been strange or suspicious. But if you accept who these three guys were and their lifestyles and the fact that they did, use and abuse drugs, you can accept that. And then, the fact that they ended up getting on it and getting on a mad one makes complete sense. Now, you can imagine that Craig picks up the guys. They're all in high spirits due to the drugs that they think they're soon going to rob, feeling untouchable. And Tony offers everyone a little pick-me-up, a little cheeky cuff, a little line, and then pow, that's it. They want to chase that high, and the guys decide to have a drugs binge rather than a meal out with their partners. Now, this theory would link into the statement taken by Billy Jasmer that the three men were killed just after midnight. Now, they may have gone to an address together, alone, to have the binge. They may have gone to an address where other people were. Hence, these could be the individuals that TMI are reaching out to, anybody that can prove that they were still alive after that time. Now, they could have gone to an address together, alone, or they could have gone to an address where other people were, or they could have taken the drugs whilst in situ in the Range Rover. I mean, like I said, given the sort of people that they were, it's the sort of thing you wouldn't put past them. And, the abuse of Class A drugs, specifically cocaine and crack cocaine, which we know the guys took, that is, those are drugs which you are chasing the high, something that is, you sort of take excessively when you're having a binge. Now, I don't personally believe in Jasper's account that they had 4 kilos of cocaine to sell, but that's again for another video. But anyway, they got on this mad one, either at an address or in the Range Rover. Then they drove to Workhouse Lane around midnight, and then they were subsequently murdered in cold blood. Now, it's just an idea. It's only a guess based on the evidence and timeline of events that happened. And the fact that they were heavy drug users who had a history of disappearing and having drug binges lasting days. it does make a bit of sense, and it could be a possibility. What do you think of this idea? Let me know in the comments, and if you have a theory, share it with me. Today, as the title states, I will be reading what was a letter that was sent to John Womes regarding Bernard O Mahoney being a potential murder suspect. And I just want to stress that this letter that I'm going to read has nothing to do with my personal opinion on who carried out the murders. I was not there on that December evening, but I do have a few personal ideas and theories, as I've sort of mentioned, and I'll go into all of that in another video. Like I said, thanks so much for all the positive support and feedback so far. And at the end of today's video, if you could like, and if you haven't already subscribed, that would be appreciated. So let's get into it. It's beyond belief that the police failed to fully investigate Bernard O Mahoney in connection with the Rettington murders. It is equally of concern that the very same police officers chose not to interview him over the death of Leah Betts. Documentary evidence proves both he and Tony Tucker were suspects in the Betts inquiry. O Mahoney was the head doorman at the nightclub where Leah's teenage friends obtained the pill that killed her. Tucker's security company fronted the operation for O Mahoney. The police were building a case around both men, but Tucker was murdered before it could mature. For the police, getting a result on the Leah Betts inquiry was of paramount importance. Kamel Ahmed, writing in The Guardian, March 1st, 1997, appears to have got it right. After a year of investigation by 35 officers, the only people found guilty of supplying the drug that led to a girl's death are 3 teenagers. Did the police go for easy targets instead of the big dealers? He was incensed by what happened to Leah Betts. Even the Prime Minister voiced his opinion. Yet, the obvious man to question, the man controlling the door, was never troubled by the 35 officers seeking the guilty parties. The day after the Rettington murders had been reported, D.I. Story decided to charge 2 of Leah's friends with supplying her the drug. He is quoted in the press as saying, "We are continuing with our investigation and lines of inquiry to get a little bit further along the drugs chain. There won't be other arrests in the short term, but tomorrow a new piece of information may change that situation completely." D.I. Story knew that there would be no further charges. O Mahoney had already told him that he would not be willing to name the dealers in the club, and the next link in the chain was O Mahoney himself. In his book, So This Is Ecstasy, he makes no secret of the fact he was actively involved in controlling the sale of drugs in the club. D.I. Story had a serious dilemma. O Mahoney was also in the frame for murdering the Rettington trio. Story knew if O Mahoney was lent on by officers from either the Betts or Rettington inquiries, he would clam up and go to ground. The police decided O Mahoney would be embraced as their star witness in the Betts trial. Detectives eager to keep him on board ignored powerful evidence that linked him to the Rettington murders, and an effort to cover up the fact failed to disclose it to the defence team of the 2 men who were later convicted of triple murders. A clear policy was adopted by the police. Any evidence linking O Mahoney to either or both inquiries would be ignored. Ivan Dibley is quoted in the Daily Express on Saturday the 9th of December 1995 as saying, "There is nothing factual to link these men with the tragedy of Leah Betts. I must say this is a pure speculation by the media. I would appreciate it if the connection between Leah Betts and the triple murder is dropped. At this moment in time, there is nothing to suggest that they had distributed drugs to Leah Betts or any of her associates. The media knew the men were linked to the Betts inquiry. Documents published by the police proved Tucker was a suspect with O Mahoney. Stephen Packman, one of the teenagers charged and acquitted of supplying Leah, said after his trial in the Daily Star on Saturday, "I've kept quiet for 15 months. Now I must clear my name. I was made the scapegoat by the police. The biggest supplier at Raquel's was Pat Tate. Everyone, it seems, knew of the link, so why did the police ask people to dismiss it? Was it because it led to O Mahoney, their star witness in the wings? When you consider the history and type of man O Mahoney is and how he was treated, you have to have serious doubts about the entire Rettington inquiry. Lawyers for Michael Steele and Jack Womes have always argued a syndicate was responsible for the murders. Much of the evidence against O Mahoney would have supported this, but it was kept from the defence and the jurors. Not once in 6 months did police officially interview O Mahoney, despite the fact he was a proven suspect. Nor did they interview Steele, a man they later claimed was in the frame from day one. The police appeared to be not that interested. Ivan Dibley told London Weekend Television after the trial, "Everyone deserves their life, whether they be criminal or whatever else. That's not to say, however, that the general public in this particular case will shed many tears because of their demise. A lot of people will say, well, good riddance. His contempt for Tony Tucker and Rolfe is apparent. On the other hand, the desire to get a result on the Betts inquiry was all-consuming. Leah, after all, was the daughter of an ex-police inspector. The media, the government, everybody demanded a result. O'Mahoney was the key to that result, as interest in the Rettendon murders diminished. Dibley retired, but then police informant Darren Nichols, a man who knew O'Mahoney, was arrested with a large shipment of drugs. In a bid to save himself from a lengthy prison sentence, he named names in a story laced with theories the police had aired in the media since the murders. Steele and Womes were the men who they named. They were later convicted on the say-so of a proven liar who was backed by police officers who deliberately shielded another suspect from the defence, and more importantly, the jury. O'Mahoney, Bernard O Mahoney, aka Bernard King, Bernard Lawson, Patrick Scanlon. Convictions: robbery, wounding, firearms, offensive weapons, deception. O'Mahoney literally fought hard to gain control of Raquel's nightclub in Basildon. After a few false starts with local men, he went into partnership with Tony Tucker. O'Mahoney was the man on the ground. Tucker provided VAT, registered invoices, drugs and additional muscle if and when required. As far as we know, things between the two went reasonably well. Not only was Raquel's a sense of achievement for O'Mahoney, he had washed up in Basildon 3 or 4 years earlier after being released from prison, where he had served a sentence for wounding. It was also a very lucrative business. O'Mahoney readily admits in his book, So This Is Ecstasy, page 83. One deal alone was netting him £500 per week. Illicit debt collection, CGQ article attached, cash on demand. Drug money and his hard-earned wages amounted to quite a substantial income for 3 5-hour shifts per week. It was not a business O'Mahoney wanted to lose for financial or face-saving reasons. It has never been disputed that O'Mahoney disliked Craig Rolfe and Craig Rolfe disliked O'Mahoney. It's fair to say that nobody living within a 15-mile radius of Basildon has fond memories of O'Mahoney. Outside that radius, few actually know him. On pages 60 to 66, O'Mahoney describes the ill feeling between himself and Rolfe. When Patrick Tate initially came out of prison, Tucker latched onto him in a big way, much to the annoyance of O'Mahoney and others who enjoyed a leading role in Tucker's operation. O'Mahoney resented Tate's intrusion into what had been a fairly slick setup. O'Mahoney was further incensed when he learned his close friend Chris Wheatley, currently serving 7 years for drug offences, had not only been sacked from his post as head doorman at the club in Club R in Southend-on-Sea, he had been threatened on the say-so of a drugged-up Tate. This caused the first rows between Tucker and O'Mahoney. Tucker and Tate had become inseparable. Neither seemed to care who they upset. Within months of Tate's release, he picked on another man O'Mahoney considered a friend, Tate. Tucker and Rolfe bullied Steve Nipper Ellis so much that in a moment of blind panic, he shot Tate. Tucker and Tate planned to shoot Ellis in a revenge attack. Tate had secreted a handgun in his hospital bed, and a message was sent out to Ellis to ask him to visit Tate so that they could sort out a misunderstanding. The plan was, when Ellis walked through the door and up to Tate's bedside, Tate was going to shoot him. Prior to Tate being shot, Tate and Rolfe had asked O'Mahoney to help them catch Ellis, but he refused. When O'Mahoney heard about the plot to murder Ellis, he rang his friend and warned him to stay well away from Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. He gave Ellis his word that if they came to the crunch, he would back Ellis against these three. Steve Ellis would be able to confirm all of this. Fortunately for the law-abiding majority in Basildon, Tate was caught in possession of a gun and promptly returned to prison. Even whilst within the confines of HMP Whitemoor in Cambridgeshire, Tate and O'Mahoney managed to increase the tension and void that had grown between them. Bradley Adelaide's, a prison friend of Reggie Cray, was moved rather unexpectedly from Reggie's side in Maidstone to a rather more daunting confines of Whitemoor. Fearing for his naive friend, Cray asked O'Mahoney to ask Tate if he would look out for the slightly built Bradley Allardyce. O'Mahoney agreed. Allardyce turned out to be a thorn in Tate's side. Words between O'Mahoney and Tate were exchanged as the gulf separating the men expanded. On the 30th of March 1995, O'Mahoney was arrested for possessing CS gas and a handgun. He knew that in 8 or 12 months, when he appeared before the courts, he would be convicted. As a result of this conviction, he would lose his contract at Raquel's. A door registration scheme is operated in Basildon, and persons convicted of such offences are prohibited from working on the door. O'Mahoney made no secret of the fact he did not want his partner Tony Tucker to succeed him. O'Mahoney approached a man named David Lawrence, employed at Marshall's Toyota, 398 London Road, Essex, and asked him to front a door staff agency. O'Mahoney told Lawrence he wanted to get rid of Tucker and control Raquel's and any other premises from behind the scenes. Lawrence was initially keen to assist and even looked into the possibility of setting up an offshore company so O'Mahoney could avoid future tax payments. Lawrence became concerned about any merger with O'Mahoney when O'Mahoney revealed to Lawrence he was considering killing a man in Cornwall for 10 grand. O'Mahoney said the man had fled Essex, but those who have grievance with him had located him and they approached O'Mahoney to carry out their dirty work. Lawrence quite naturally lost his initial enthusiasm and stalled O'Mahoney until future events destroyed all hopes of O'Mahoney's plans. O'Mahoney had made an offer on a house which was in excess of £100,000. He now realised by the time the sale had gone through, he would be without an income. He was desperate to arrange anything that could prevent him from effectively ending up homeless and broke. According to O'Mahoney, by August 1995, relations between himself, his associates and others were dire. He writes, "There was an atmosphere of evil induced by paranoia, drugs and mistrust. This atmosphere of evil," he talks of, "resulted in members of their gang using violence not on just those who crossed them, but on each other. The once slick operation was falling down around them. Tucker was threatening to kill Mark Murray, a man who peddled Tucker's drugs in the clubs, where Tucker ran the door. O'Mahoney was conspiring to oust Tucker and beating up other gang members who had done nothing more than stroke his paranoia with innocent remarks or even laughter. O'Mahoney's house purchase was completed on the very day Tate came out of prison following his arrest for the gun in Basildon Hospital. O'Mahoney must have known that if he had problems before, Tate was now going to increase them tenfold. O'Mahoney obviously had some long-term plan, what only he knows, but he lied to everybody else. He had moved to Saffron Walden, but we have since learned he moved to Mill Road, Maryland, Chelmsford. This is approximately 5 miles from the murder scene in Rettendon. Tucker had arranged a welcome party home for Tate at Dagenham Snooker Hall, but O'Mahoney, much to Tucker and Tate's annoyance, snubbed it. By his own admission, O'Mahoney discussed visiting Rettendon with Tucker and Tate that week. The purpose for that visit, according to O'Mahoney, was to look for 500 grand worth of cannabis that had been dropped in a lake in the area. The police had recovered it, but O'Mahoney claims Tate thought there would be more, which lay undiscovered. Detective Chief Inspector Ivan Dibley claimed, "I strongly believe that there was a connection between the cannabis in West Hanningfield and this Rettendon case. We only have O'Mahoney's word that he never visited the area with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. We know in other areas he has misled people in his book." O'Mahoney's reference to his new home, for instance. O'Mahoney also admits he was called to a meeting shortly before the murders with Tucker and Tate. They discussed robbing a large shipment of drugs. O'Mahoney claims he declined the offer. We only had his word for this. Mahoney has never disclosed the details of that robbery, which is odd when you consider that he has disclosed details of murder, conspiracy to murder, attempted murder and other crimes he and his associates were involved in. With the other participants in the robbery dead, non-disclosure may indicate he is protecting himself. On page 149 of O'Mahoney's book, O'Mahoney talks about Tate lining something big up for the firm inside. O'Mahoney says Tate was in Whitemore prison at the time. Steele and Womes were elsewhere. Could the something big Tate was lining up Whitemore be the robbery O'Mahoney was invited to assist with? O'Mahoney, we know, had a financial nightmare looming. He was due to appear at Chelmsford Crown Court on the 27th of November 1995, less than 4 weeks after Tate's release. Considering his demeanour and his track record, it's incredible he turned down such an offer from Tucker and Tate. The fact he kept the details to himself makes it even more unlikely. On November the 11th, 1995, Leah Betts collapsed after taking drugs that had been obtained in Raquel's. O'Mahoney's previous problems were about to pale in comparison to the problems the Betts inquiry was going to cause him. Documentary evidence provided by the police and evidence given by the police at the time proves that O'Mahoney and Tucker were suspected of being involved in supplying the pill that killed Leah Betts. O'Mahoney has claimed that he refused to get involved in whatever robbery Tucker and Tate were involved with in the weeks before their deaths. It seems odd, therefore, that he was willing to divert police and media attention away from Raquel's on Tucker's say-so following Leah's death. O'Mahoney admits, after discussing the situation with Tucker, he would lure one of Leah's friends, Steve Packman, to a meeting where he would be exposed as a man who supplied Leah with the fatal drugs that evening. Packman told Norwich Crown Court he was so scared he told O'Mahoney what he thought he wanted to hear. He also said somebody claiming to represent O'Mahoney had visited his home in Pound Lane, Basildon, and warned him, if you implicate O'Mahoney, he will break your legs and burn down your house. Despite confessing to O'Mahoney on tape, the jury believed Packman and he was acquitted. Unfortunately for O'Mahoney, nothing went according to plan. His involvement was reported to the police by a journalist. O'Mahoney could see a curtain falling. A shutdown with Tucker and his sidekick Tate was unavoidable. O'Mahoney, still floundering in financial mire, sold an expose about the availability of drugs in Raquel's to the Daily Express for £8,000. Published Monday the 20th of November 95 in a double-page spread stating club turns blind eye to ecstasy peril. O'Mahoney then walked out of Raquel's after 5 years, claiming he was sickened by what happened to Leah. Before leaving, he handed control of the club over to a fellow doorman named Maurice Golding because he was still at pains to prevent Tucker from taking over. The same night, he bumped into Tucker and Tate in a Southend nightclub called Ad-Lib. He claims in his book that he went outside to speak with Tucker and he leant against the driver's door of the Range Rover. The bodies were later discovered in. Why would O'Mahoney add such detail? Friends of the murdered men are adamant Tucker and Tate were not in that vehicle that night. Was O'Mahoney trying to account for any forensic evidence that may have been found on the Range Rover? The police should have checked whether or not Tucker and Tate were in that vehicle that night, and if not, looked into why O'Mahoney was so keen to deceive. On Sunday the 19th of November 95, Steve Packman and Mark Murray appeared in the News of the World. It was an expose identifying the men alleged to have supplied Leah Betts. This was a direct result of O'Mahoney's meeting with Packman, which he had planned with Tucker and had hoped would divert attention away from them both. Although Tucker is not mentioned in O'Mahoney's police statement, he does reveal Tucker's involvement in the plot in his book. There are quotes in the Malden and Burham Standard, February the 27th, 97, from the Leah Betts trial. David Sims, manager of Raquel's, said, "A man named Anthony Tucker was in charge of security at the club, and Bernard, the then doorman, was Tucker's right-hand man." He goes on to quote O'Mahoney's evidence. He, O'Mahoney, agreed he wasn't happy Raquel's nightclub had been drawn into the Leah Betts investigation, and he was under some sort of pressure from his business partner, Tony Tucker, to sort it out. Tucker blamed O'Mahoney for including Murray in the News of the World article, but O'Mahoney denies this. In his police statement, he denies even knowing Murray to the journalist. O'Mahoney was certainly not in fear of Tucker and Tate. The following day, the article he cooperated with for the Daily Express was published. It was as if he was gloating Tucker. He was certainly openly defying him. On page 169 of O'Mahoney's book, he writes, "Tucker left a message on his answering machine saying, 'I'm going to fucking do you.' Williams and Draper had made similar threats in the past. They survived O'Mahoney's attempt to kill them." The same day that the Daily Express article was published, we know O'Mahoney booked into the Thomas Kemble Hotel in Runwell Road. This is less than 1 mile from the murder scene at Rettendon. O'Mahoney used his partner's surname, King. In the morning, he was in a foul mood. The staff were threatened over the services provided, and O'Mahoney was given a full refund, which was sent to his home address. In his book, O'Mahoney claims he stayed at the hotel because of his concerns over Tucker turning up at his home. If this is true, it seems odd that O'Mahoney felt confident enough to arm himself and go down to Raquel's to see Tucker about money he was owed 4 days later. We've actually learned that O'Mahoney did not move out of his Basildon home until the 2nd of December 95, 4 days after the killings at Rettendon. Why would O'Mahoney book into a hotel when his home was only 3 or 4 miles away? Why Rettendon, when there are several hotels in Basildon? Between Monday the 20th of November 95 and Friday the 24th of November 95, Tucker went to see David Sims, the Raquel's manager. David Sims now manages a club in Cardiff for European Leisure, the same company who owned Raquel's. Tucker convinced Sims to reverse the arrangements O'Mahoney had made. The door was took off O'Mahoney's choice, Maurice Golden, and given to Tucker. O'Mahoney telephoned Golding and rowed with him for letting Tucker take it. On Friday the 24th of the 11th, 95, the doorman told O'Mahoney that Sims had been dancing with joy now that he had gone and Tucker had taken control. O'Mahoney armed himself and went down to confront Tucker at the club. Tucker had obviously foreseen this and arrived with several of his friends. One of these men was Michael Bowman. Bowman was later arrested in connection with a machine gun Tucker and Tate had allegedly asked for to kill someone. In the Daily Mirror, published December, a CID source talking about Rettendon is quoted as saying, it was a brilliantly executed assassination. The victims were lured to the lane to discuss having someone else hit, but the tables were turned on them. We had excellent information that Rolfe and Tate had been trying to hire a killer to rub out a rival drug dealer, but it seems the intended victim got his shot in first. Their intended victim pushed ecstasy in Raquel's nightclub in Basildon. Who this CID source is unclear, but their desire to murder someone involved in the sale of drugs in Raquel's ties in with the events surrounding O'Mahoney. Everybody, including the police, knew death threats were being made against O'Mahoney. He confirms this in his book. It is common knowledge that O'Mahoney's views are not on people who claim to be looking for him. You certainly do not have to ask Draper or Williams. The Daily Express, Friday, December the 8th, 95, also had received the same type of information as the Mirror. The gangster allegedly ordered their assassination after he was tipped off that they were planning to kill him for being a police informant. The man who has links with the Crays and another gangland family was accused of revealing the trio's drug dealing activities. The following day, Saturday the 26th of the 11th, 95, Tate and Rolfe went looking for O'Mahoney in the Buzz Bar, which is an annex of Raquel's nightclub. On Monday the 28th of the 11th, 95, O'Mahoney appeared at Chelmsford Crown Court for possessing CS gas and a handgun. The case was adjourned after he pleaded guilty. Reports were requested before he could be sentenced. Tuesday the 29th of the 11th, 95, the police are still trying to build a case against O'Mahoney. They seized the interview tapes from the Daily Express, Club turns a blind eye to ecstasy peril, with Express journalist Ian Cobain. O'Mahoney had again been clever not to implicate himself or others on the tapes. Wednesday the 30th of the 11th, 95, O'Mahoney appears at Chelmsford Crown Court again. He claims in his book, the police paved the way for him getting a soft sentence. He was given 6 months imprisonment, suspended for 1 year, and £150 court costs. Why were the police so keen to appease O'Mahoney? The Betts case was getting nowhere and nobody would talk through fear. The police knew about Tucker and O'Mahoney's rift. They knew O'Mahoney had spoken to the press. Perhaps if it matters, this escalated, he would talk to them. Thursday, O'Mahoney claims police warned him Tucker was planning to shoot him. Friday, the 2nd of the 12th, 95, Leah Betts' funeral takes place. Saturday, the 3rd of the 12th, 95, O'Mahoney moved out of Basildon to his new home near Rettendon. We have also learned that this weekend O'Mahoney hired a vehicle from Tavern Hire in Malden, Essex. This, despite the fact he owns at least 3 vehicles of his own. O'Mahoney rows with Tucker on the telephone. He tells Tucker, I don't give a fuck about people, I'm out of it. Sunday, December the 4th, 95, O'Mahoney tells friends he spent the day in Birmingham. Monday, December the 5th, 95, O'Mahoney claims the police once more warn him about Tucker threatening to shoot him. O'Mahoney, rather than the police, sets the time and day for a meeting with them about the Pacman tape, which has been handed to the police by a journalist, and his problems with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Tuesday, December the 6th, 95, between 2 p.m. and approximately 4 p.m, O'Mahoney has the perfect alibi. He is with D.I. Story at South Woodden Ferrers police station. He claims in his book they discuss him making a statement about the Pacman H tape, and he is once again warned about the threats from Tucker. At no stage does O'Mahoney ever acknowledge fear from the men he knows have already committed one murder, that's Kevin Whitaker, and he knows are extremely violent. He claims he left Woodham at about 4 p.m. and drove to his partner's mother's at approximately 5 p.m. We know that she lives at 2 Yedo Cottages, Bowers Gifford, Pitsea, Essex. The journey from Woodham Police Station would take approximately 10 minutes. Why was O'Mahoney so keen to lie about his timings? There are approximately 50 missing minutes spent near the murder scene. Did he meet somebody? He goes on to say that at approximately 6:30 he was driving along the same road as the murdered trio, less than 1 mile from the murder scene. He claims he was at the Rettendon Turnpike. He does not say whether or not their paths crossed, nor does he say he knew that they were there. Darren Nichols claims he was at Rettendon around this time. It is a tiny village. Neither O'Mahoney or Nichols confess or mention seeing one another. A call was made to Tucker's mobile phone that afternoon from a village in Suffolk. We have learned that O'Mahoney, using the name King, had visited a house in Great Blakenham 3 or 4 times prior to the murders with a view to exchanging his Basildon home with the occupants. O'Mahoney regularly visited Suffolk with Tucker, who ran the doors at Hollywood's nightclub in Ipswich. O'Mahoney admits he had shown Tucker the house in Great Blakenham he was considering moving into. O'Mahoney had the perfect alibi. He had arranged to see the police at the time the call was being made. Could he have arranged for an accomplice, Darren Nichols perhaps, to make the call from an area he obviously knew well, knowing it would baffle police, as Tucker had no known connection with that immediate area? In the Evening Echo, January the 15th, 1995, Pat Tate's mother is quoted as saying, "Pat was warned about going to that meeting in Rettendon, but he went to protect Tony because he was such a big man he thought nothing could happen to him." It is clear from Marie Tate she had been told Tony Tucker was the man who was in confrontation with somebody. Why did Tucker receive the most gunshot wounds? Was he the centre of the assassin's aggression? When Tucker and O'Mahoney had fallen out around the time of Tate's second release, Tucker had purchased a new home, Brymount Lodge, High Road, Fobbing, Essex, approximately 2 miles from O'Mahoney's. Prior to this, Tucker had lived several miles away at the 5 Diamond Close, Chatford 100, Essex. Whether or not Tucker felt vulnerable in his new home, we shall never know, but he applied to Basildon Police 6 weeks before his death for a shotgun licence. He had no convictions, and therefore we assume he would have been granted one. It is odd he applied for a weapons licence even before Tat's release and any alleged association with Steele had commenced. Now, how and when the trio died bore a remarkable resemblance to an attack O'Mahoney carried out on Steve Woods, the victim of a shooting with a shotgun, by one of O'Mahoney's friends. Woods had made a statement about O'Mahoney's friend after he was shot in his own home in front of his wife. Initially agreeing to withdraw his statement, Woods changed his mind and O'Mahoney decided to shoot him. O'Mahoney used a man named Billy Gillings to take Woods to a remote area. Gillings was told to tell Woods to get out of his car and then drive off. Woods, still on crutches from the initial shooting, would then be shot by O'Mahoney. Gillings took Woods to the rendezvous, but he could not go through with it. O'Mahoney assured Woods there was no problem and told Woods to get into his car. Woods was driven off to a farmer's field. The gun was produced and Woods was led to a ditch. Woods pleaded for his life and agreed to retract his statement, which he did do. The Rettendon murders were executed in very similar circumstances. Despite never holding a firearms licence, we know O'Mahoney has always owned guns, including shotguns. He has served in Northern Ireland and is fully versatile in tactical ambush and the use of weapons. The morning after the murders, O'Mahoney crops up in London at his solicitor's, the perfect place for a man needing an account for his movements to be, no doubt arranged by him. He claims that he rang home to see if he had any messages. From whom he was expecting a message, he does not know. The police, he says, had left a message asking him to contact them urgently. When he did, he says they told him of the murders. What O'Mahoney does not say in his book, that in the early hours of that morning, before 11 a.m, he telephoned Sue Woods and her boyfriend Gavin and told them the trio were dead, but told them not to tell anybody else. O'Mahoney told them the police had told him, but this was before the times he claims in his book. O'Mahoney's appointment was 10 a.m. The call was made prior to him reaching his destination. O'Mahoney's book was The Ghost, written by magazine journalist Simon Hills. Hills wrote the GQ article Hit and Mystery, attached, in which the details of the victims' injuries and their body positions were exact. O'Mahoney readily admits he cooperated with his co-author on the GQ article. How did O'Mahoney know so much fine detail? Hills now works for the Times magazine. Hills and O'Mahoney worked on Cash on Demand and Hard Graft together for GQ. O'Mahoney is identified by his tattoos in Hardgraph, which also proves his drug dealing activities at Raquel's 2 or 3 weeks before Leah's death. His hands and darkened image identify him in the Cash on Demand article. On page 184 of O'Mahoney's book, he is in pains to point out he didn't know where the murder scene was. However, he goes on to say, once the police had completed their search, he drove down there. He doesn't explain how he suddenly found or learned of such a remote place. On page 187, he readily admits to visiting the graves of Tate and Rolfe, but he cannot bring himself to visit Tucker's grave. This also indicates his grievance or problem lay with Tucker more so than Rolfe and Tate. So guys, that was the end of part 1. Part 2 I will be giving in a second video. Thank you for listening as always. Thank you for all of the messages, kind words of support, comments, etc. It all helps and is all appreciated. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so now, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.